Good evening and welcome to the special council meeting of the city of Marshfield. It is Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. This is a special meeting on budgetary matters. We've been called to order. We got a quorum present. Mr. Barg is joining us via video. And let's see, if you'll all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is the public hearing on the budget. We have one person that has indicated they wanted to be received. I believe that's Peg Hardinger. Peg, would you like to come up to the rostrum and you get your 5 minutes. And you might have to pull that microphone down and press the little red button down on the base. There you go.
Button.
Yeah.
Good evening. I've never done this before, so I'm sure a lot of you are just going to roll your eyes at what I have to say, but I would feel better by saying it, and I never know who to call at the City Hall to talk to. So anyway, let me begin by saying I'm a Marshfield native and a property owner, and I've actually read the whole 71 pages.
I'm sorry, Peg, could you just state your name and address for the record?
Yes, I'm Peg Hardinger, 813 North Columbus Avenue, Marshfield, Wisconsin. I think the gist of the whole budget thing is that all the city services and functions have increased in cost, just like for all of us, our things have increased in cost. But I see one of the biggest increases that I could find was in the administration positions. Now, maybe those positions could possibly wait, and the money could be used to mitigate the utility cost or property tax relief. I want to know how the addition of positions is decided. I understand that probably the department heads ask for something, and then it goes through to the council in the end, and the council votes on yes or no on that kind of a position. But I wonder if the council and the department heads, how many facts do they really use in deciding if that is an appropriate position because of the cost? Yeah, the more people that we hire for, I'm sorry, I must be getting some feedback, but the more people that we hire for administration positions and not actual city services, the more salaries and perks that we have to pay for along with the services. And in my opinion, I think the city is becoming a little top heavy on the administration part. I question this is really what we want. To me, a city is formed by people who want to live in a certain area, and they elect or hire people to run that city and to pay their bills while they provide services for the residents. The key word is services, not administration. This kind of goes along with the ability for input from the citizens. As an example, I understand that the city owns the utility company. So it seems to me we should have a lot more input on what they charge us and how they charge us for their services. The case in point is a new street light tax. I just wondered if possibly these kind of projects ever go to a public opinion poll, and maybe we could get some thinking outside the box, such as, I've heard this from a few neighbors, could we band together and buy a solar street light to put on our street? And that way it would be paid for by the people, but it would be a one-time charge, not an every month charge. And I kind of feel the same way about the end of the leaf and yard waste pickup. I understand it, that it was a cost thing, but I just wondered if possibly they had ever been considered skipping a recycle pickup, maybe 1 or 2 times, and then substituting a waste yard pickup. That was a good service for a lot of elderly people, a lot of disabled people, and just even a lot of the regular citizens. It is just, and we also, I think the city owns a street sweeper, and a lot of cities allow people to push their leaves into the street, and then the street sweeper picks them up or does whatever it does with them. I'm not too sure. And that kind of brings me in how we communicate with our council and our whatever. I know that, you know, there's postings and there's the on focus parts and all the technical parts. But I was thinking, is there a way to have a physical space such as a library, because of the longer opening hours, that a person could go and read a physical paper on what the council has done, what they're projecting, what they think could be next. Because the technology, I know this is old school, but a lot of the citizens in this town are old school and maybe don't have the ability to use computers or know how to find it or where to go for it. I know that I have checked many, many different sites to see what's going on, and it seems like I never can find one that kind of just puts it all together for me. Anyway, my last concern is kind of about property taxes. I guess I know they need to be adjusted, but when they're adjusted by a substantial amount, and I'm talking if they go up $300 to $400 to $500 for someone for a homeowner in 1 year, is there any possibility of any mitigation that could be used? And I know this is also outside the box, but is there any way people could work off a part of their taxes by doing some of the services that maybe the city pays extra for, like cleaning the offices in the city hall or painting or park maintenance or anything like that, that could be delivery services, things like that you could do.
Ms. Hardinger, could you wind it up? This is your 5 minute. You've had your 5 minutes. Can you wind it up, please?
I'm just about done here. In closing, I just want to thank you for your attention and to say that I would like a follow-up from someone at City Hall about my concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your input, ma'am. Are there any other citizens who wish to make comments concerning the budget? Second call. Anybody else? Last call. Anybody want to speak on the budget? If not, we'll declare the public hearing on the 2024 budget closed. The 2024 budget closed. That's going to make me nuts before the night's over. You know that. The next thing up is the request, is item D, request from staff for the approval of certain adjustments to the recommended 2024 budget presented by Jennifer Selensky, Finance Director. Jennifer, you get the floor.
Good evening. Throughout the budget cycle, we have come across new information as we progress along that would result in changes to the original document that was prepared. If you look at your first page of your handout, essentially, these changes relate to, we found out a little later in the game about the seed grant from Wood County, and some of those either had or hadn't been budgeted at the time the document was prepared. So we have cleaned up and taken out any items that we would not be receiving the grant, and then added in those that we would. So that's part of those changes. And then we also had, due to our revaluation in terms of So that's that first section. The fund summary is essentially telling you that on the expense side. Then on the revenue side, it's equal offsetting. We either put in or took out the revenue. And then when you get down into the TID funds, which begin with 428 through 438, you'll see some revenue reductions, and that has to do with our valuation and the timing. Although the valuation went up when the state prepared their documents that were to use for increment, they hadn't been updated at the time. That happened in June. The reval was closed late August, but we were already stuck with the June number. So that will result in a decrease in TID revenue for 2024. That essentially summarizes those few changes that we had discovered since the last meeting. Are there any questions about those? Rebecca? Throughout, because it does impact different departments. So for example, in the communications fund, we had anticipated a grant to be received, but it is not going to be received, so we took it out.
So that's label 101?
That would be labeled 235.
That's what, communication?
Right.
101.
101 is the general fund, and some of the changes within the, it's a high-level summary, just kind of, these are just things that happened as a result of the grant primarily, and then the reduction in TIF revenue.
Okay, so 420 is?
420 had anticipated some grant revenue, and then was awarded in the seed grant for the pickleball. They got a $25,000 grant.
So that's right.
Yep. So not a whole lot there that really had any major impacts on those few changes, but they should be made now that we are aware of those.
I'm done.
Excuse me, who is it? Oh. Okay, Natasha, it's yours.
Okay, so Jennifer, are you saying that in this graph, the revenue reduction, so we anticipated that we would get 557,000. Did all of that 557,000, was that all in the budget or some of it wasn't?
Some in, some out. The most of that was in that we now need to take out. So when you're looking at all of the amounts 428 and below, which is most of that $537,000, that's the TID tax revenue. At the time when I prepared the budget, I was estimating we didn't have all of the information. So once all of those rolls were equated and the final values posted, then I realized this week that those were overstated. We will not materialize those revenues.
All right, and do any of these affect the general fund?
The general fund will be impacted slightly with a small seed grant that was related for relating to historical signage. That wasn't originally in the budget, so we added it. It was like $5,000. Also, the airport seed grant that was awarded for 2024, we also received, actually received it in 2023. They paid us early for that, so that's moving it into a restricted category so that we can preserve that grant in the general fund for next year.
So can you tell us what is the status of the budget as compared with the memo that the city administrator sent out with us? Mr. City Administrator's on video with us, so maybe he can explain how we stand in comparison with that memo that he sent out.
So if we could take it sort of one step at a time. These are minor adjustments without a lot of impact to the bottom line. Any adjustment in the general fund that would decrease expense would just serve to be adjusted against the contingency account. So overall, all of the adjustments tonight, the general fund budget will remain the same as originally proposed at $26,545,545, but any adjustments plus or minus in the expense would be offsetting contingency. So the overall budget level stays the same. It's just the amount that we are recording in the contingency account. So no bottom line effect with the total value of the general fund budget. Am I confusing you more?
Yes, because so that what you're saying essentially is that we still are faced with the same $400 and some odd $1,000 adjustment to the general fund.
That'll be the next item, yes, and we'll get to that. But we're adjusting that against the amount that we put in contingency, which allows us the participation in the ERP program, right? So our budget overall from year to year will net effect be the 26 million. However, the amount in contingency will now increase while the cuts that we need to make in spending accounts will decrease. So that's offsetting. So we're preserving that amount that carries forward for participation in expenditure restraint.
Okay, maybe when you put the other pieces on the table, we'll understand it a little better. Without objection, the clerk would like to make a comment.
I think what Jennifer is trying to say right now she's specifically looking at the item D and is basically looking for a motion to approve those certain adjustments that she just presented. We're doing these one piece at a time. Just this smaller piece right now is what she's looking at.
Okay. Council, what's your pleasure? What? Okay, Natasha, then Mr. Marshall. No, that's a motion in a second, okay. Any discussion? You want to do this by voice? Or are you going to take it registered? We're going to take this on voice. No. On the board. Okay. It'll be on the board. And the vote is, let's see, is that 9-1 with the 1 nay? 9-1. Yep. Okay. Okay, you still have the floor.
Okay, so if you want to read item E, I will start by explaining the revenue shortfall, and then Mr. Barg will talk about the proposed expense cuts. So that'll be the last page of the handout. What we learned earlier this week was that our anticipated payment from our utilities for our pilot, which is our payment in lieu of taxes, was actually going to be less than we budgeted. There are a couple of factors for that, and the first is a result of our reval. So when we have to think of the payment in lieu of taxes as the tax liability to the city, which is based on the value of the utilities assets. We take that and we apply the city's ratio of assessed to full value to come up with a starting base for the assessed value that the utility would be paying its payment in lieu of taxes for. Once we have that, we look at the tax rates that are applicable to that calculation, which is the city, the school district, and the technical college, and that would be net of our state tax credit. So this year, the city went in, had a full revaluation, and its tax rate decreased by $2.72 per $1,000 of assessed value. This $2.72. The school district also had a very significant decrease in its tax levy from about 15 million down to around 10 million, causing its tax rate to become $5.07 per $1,000 of assessed value, and that's a decrease of $5.60. The technical college also had a slight decrease in its levy for the year, and its tax rate fell about 37 cents. So overall, the tax rate that will be applied to the value of the utilities assets has gone from $21.11 to $12.54, which is a decrease of $8.50. So when you apply that to the value of its assets, we are estimating a pilot payment of about $1.78 million, and we budgeted $2.1 million in our 2024 budget. So the two things that impacted that are the complete reval, which drives the tax rate down, and then a decrease in the school district's need for its levy, also driving that down pretty significantly. Are there any questions on how we got to the revenue shortfall?
Yeah, go ahead, Natasha, and then Stauber.
Thank you. Okay. This is all based on a change in tax rate. It's not based on the value of their assets. Is that correct?
It's both. So it's the value of the assets times the tax rate, multiplied by that tax rate. So the value of the utilities assets did increase about $12 million over prior year due to the, wrapping up the building project that they had. So there's a derived benefit just because the assets went up, but when you lower tax rates due to, decreased need in your levy or reval, then that becomes a lower multiple.
So the pilot payment is affected by both the tech and the school tax rates. Do they receive money from that pilot, or is that completely coming to us?
All of the share of the pilot comes for those two entities, other entities comes to the city.
Gotcha, thank you.
Mr. Stauber, you withdrew. Anybody else? Jennifer, proceed.
So with that, we are recommending proposed cuts in expenditures to offset that reduced revenue of $340,000 in the 2024 budget. And that is where Mr. Barg would go through that list with you.
Thank you. I get the impression that my speaking is creating some feedback there. Is that possibly true?
Yes.
I think
Do I sound okay?
you're doing better now. You're doing better now.
Okay, if it doesn't create back, I apologize, and I can call on the cell phone, but it sounds like maybe I'm giving you a little bit on that end, but I'll go ahead unless you ask me to stop. When Jennifer came to me and described the issue with pilot last week, obviously that threw a big wrench into approval of the 2024 budget. $340,000 roughly is quite a bit of money to account for in a short period of time. But I immediately started meeting with her and Jordan and talked to some department leaders as well about possibilities for how we might be able to reduce that and mitigate it to hopefully zero. You may recall that in past years we have oftentimes used a certain amount of fund balance applied to balance the annual budget. We've committed ourselves to not doing that anymore. And so this is an example of a time when we need to find our way back to zero, where revenues and expenses balance off without the use of general fund reserves. So in looking at the possibilities since then, we've come up with a list, which I think you have in front of you tonight. I'm going to walk through it with you, but before I do, I want to kind of highlight the fact that this is a result of some rather quick pulling together of ideas and numbers. It's maybe not exactly to the penny. My suggestion at the end of this is going to be, if you think this is a good framework and you give me any ideas for modification and changes for what you'd like to see, we put back to you on Tuesday, the 28th for final approval with everything nailed down and buttoned up. But tonight, looking to see if you think we're on the right track with.
I think we just lost him. Steve? Okay. Jennifer, we seem to have lost.
The general fund reserves to fund 3 firefighter paramedic positions.
Steve?
These are not new positions, but these would be to, what?
Steve, I hate to interrupt you, but we lost you for about 10 seconds.
Steve, I hate to interrupt you, but we lost
could you
you for
start
about 10 seconds
back
there.
up?
Okay.
Could you start back up?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I will go back. We are looking to find ways to mitigate the roughly $340,000 without the use of general fund reserve monies. So, but I want to say, and I apologize if this was missed, that the idea here with this list is it's a framework. These are not exact dollars. This has been the effort of the last few days between the finance staff who's helped me, myself, and talking with some department heads of getting an idea what this could look like and how we could reduce that 340. The first 2 items are related to personnel. You may recall that in the 2024 budget, we were including refilling 3 firefighter paramedic positions that have been left vacant for the past couple of years. This was part of the referendum that did not pass back in April. These 3 positions, which were there again since 2021 going back, total about $312,000. So the proposal would be to start those positions on July 1st at mid-year, thereby saving 50% of that cost at $156,000. We also have in the 2024 budget to refill a police detective position. And the proposal here would be to delay that until, it says 4/1, I think that's supposed to be 5/1, I apologize. And that would save roughly $35,000. Next, we found that our workers' comp costs could be reduced, it appears, by $33,000. So that reduction is factored in as well as the savings. A couple of proposals that we're looking at using the ARPA funds, sort of reworking the ARPA numbers to cover. One is the IT network penetration test that they do every 2 years, I believe, to make sure that our system is secure from outside invasions. And that costs $24,000. Next up would be the Economic Development Board proposal for use of the 205 money, the Economic Development Fund, which of course is coming directly to the council now under the new policy. It's the money that we get from Marshfield Utility and the dividend. The $23,000 that would be used for consultants for an economic development action plan. This has been on the docket from the board for the last couple of years, but we haven't gotten to it in part because we've lacked staff. As you know, as we start 2024, that's not going to be much different. We're without a director or a city planner, and that makes it hard to work on some of the items of that plan. beyond the consultant. So suggesting that perhaps that could be pulled off as well, and those monies used to supplement our deficit with respect to this revenue shortfall. Next up, we're obviously, as you know, planning to hire an assistant city administrator / community development director. The budget includes starting that position on January 1st. The current hiring timeline we have with our consulting firm, GovHR, suggests that the hiring would be complete in the middle of January, with the person expected to take the position here after giving notice somewhere in the middle to latter part of February. So I backed up the starting date to February 15th with pay and benefits that would save $20,000. Our contingency has been tweaked a little bit, given what Jennifer was reporting earlier, to account for some of those late changes that you heard of. At one point, it was a little bit over $100,000. Currently, it's $88,000. So this would be a proposal to reduce it by $18,000 to $70,000. You know, we have some of that money set aside, at least mentally, for the adjustments that may be needed after the accommodation study. Up this coming to sort of some of those adjustments that may be needed. We'll change for something him up during you and stay there. Next up is the replacement of traffic signal bulbs going to the I think the LDD, and the plan here is to go to ARPA funding for the 2024 replace piece of the program. This replacement will go on for a few years, but for 2024, we had it in the CIP for $15,000. This would replace that with ARPA funds to cover that expense. The next item is really just kind of nebulous at this point, in the sense that it's not nailed down. I talked to Justin Kasperson, our Park and Recreation Director, earlier today about the possibility that some expenses could be cut out, parks-related budgets, perhaps in part-time staffing. No decision was made on that as yet, but my suggestion to you is that between that possibility and some other odds and ends, that we can find $10,000 of assorted reductions to meet criteria for that July. And then finally, the city planner we have scheduled to start in our budget on April 1st. But if we don't have an assistant city administrator, community development director on board until the middle to the latter part of February, that's not going to happen, because the new director is going to be involved in the process of selecting that individual. So looking at backing that up a little bit to match the backing up of the assistant city administrator, be moving the city planner back to a start date of around May 15th. And that month and a half would save an additional $6,000. You remember that we are paying offsetting monies to a consulting firm, SEH, for the services of Bryce Hembrook. So the difference between the two would be roughly $6,000. So if you put all that together, you end up with $340,000 worth of cuts. Again, I would suggest that this is a framework for your consideration tonight. It's not exact dollar amounts, and it's not all the details having been worked through with all the people necessarily in every case, but I think this is workable and could be the template we use for getting to the finish line on this. But certainly at this point, I would take questions on any of these 10 items, or any other ideas that the council might have for possibly reducing the budget to meet the objective.
Mrs. Spiros.
Do you have a motion on the table? You should find out first.
Okay, we have a motion by Stauber, second by Giles.
We have a motion by Stauber, second by Giles.
Ms. Spiros.
Could we have him announce this? Could we have him announce this?
Steve, you might have to mute yourself so we don't get feedback.
Go ahead and make your motion.
You might have to mute yourself so we don't get feedback. Go ahead and make your motion.
So the motion is to accept the framework as recommended for the 2024 budget due to the pilot reduction as presented by City Administrator Bark.
Okay, that's been mentioned by you, by Stauber, and second by Giles. And we have first up to speak, Ms. Spiros.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I know I appreciate your work, Steve and Jennifer. I know this came as a surprise, and I know we're against a deadline, but I do have some questions. I wondered how much we have left in ARPA. Somebody could give me that number.
We had about $100,000 last minute. There was a generator project at the library that we determined we didn't need, so that freed up about $100,000. In Mr. Berg's proposal, we'll be using roughly half of that to do a couple of items that were to be financed.
So our would be at 50,000?
Right.
Okay, okay. And then remove EDB's 2024 ED action plan. Is this the Second Street project that we were gonna hire consultants with, or something separate? I'm getting head shakes. Okay, gotcha. Something separate, I'm getting head shakes. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, what we really have going on, Rebecca, here is, if I can explain, if you looked at the EDB proposal to the council, it included $50,000 in consulting fees, and it was $25,000 for the economic development action plan and $25,000 for just various consultants that might be needed on projects that might arise or that might be considered by the board. The council
Thank God.
was not about dollars from modeling currently 23 of total $50,000 per person. So what I've done here is suggest that perhaps the EDB could postpone the action plan for another year until we have the staff on board and ready to be helping out with our part here of getting that done. I have not discussed this with the EDB. They haven't met since then. So that's one of the things I'd like to maybe get a chance to do, at least talk to the chair and run this by before we bring it to the finish line on the 28th. But I think this would be a viable way to go, because I think that plan is really not ripe at this moment.
Okay, next question would be Parks. Steve, you have to mute, because every time you stay off of mute. Okay. Parks cut PT staff cost $10,000. Would this affect the pool hours operation? Because I definitely would not want to see a further reduction in pool operating hours. So I'm just going to leave that at that. I know that's fluid. No one has to answer it, but that's my opinion on that. I would not be in favor of that at all if it is going to affect the hours that the pool remains open. Contingency reduction by 18,000, I don't agree with at all. I am aware of a significant cost that's going to be coming up related to the fire department, and I assume that money is going to need to come out of contingency since we didn't budget for it either, which would then put us negative. So I just wanted to say that. I would suggest that we charge the utility company, the utilities separately for their insurance coverage, which to my understanding is anywhere in the $15,000 to $25,000 range. So I think that they should be paying that themselves. And that's all I'm going to say right now.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I think I'll apologize up front for my frustration, but as I look at this list, I am an absolute no. This is once again kicking the can down the road. You go through this list, we're going to have the same problems next year that we have this year. Nothing is going to change with this pilot program. I'm not real sure what we're trying to accomplish with this, but I cannot support this.
Next is Mr. Warman.
Yeah, I actually, I kind of have the same thought process as Mike there. My concerns are, especially looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 of these line items for sure are just delays. And that to me is a big red flag that we're just putting off the inevitable at this point instead of finding an actual solve. And Jennifer, I was hoping maybe you could speak to this a little bit. So I would assume the 2.1 million that we budgeted for pilot was based on trending amounts that we looked at and evaluated and assumed this is going to happen this year. Now that we have taken this hit, I would assume that trend obviously gets skewed. And now we're looking ahead at next year saying, is this going to happen again? Are we going to hit some middle ground? Like, what does that do for us down the line? Should we start considering those types of things now and put in permanent solves rather than looking at temporary fixes like this that just delay it for several months?
It is it is somewhat of a reset because of the valuation. So if we remember the inputs, it's whatever those three taxing jurisdictions decide to levy. So at any point in time, our levy, we know, goes up 70 to 80,000 on the general levy due to net new construction, and then anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 to $400,000 on the debt part of the levy. So our levy will fluctuate a little bit. Right now, it's unpredictable what the school district or the tech college will do in future years, given what we know about a failed referendum for the school last year. There's a very good possibility they would come back and then incur debt, which would increase their levy, which would increase that tax rate, which would result in more pilot money available. I'm not sure exactly the direction the utilities assets that are subject to that will be. I don't think they have any major building type construction projects for at least a couple to 3 years down the line. So that number is probably not materially going to change. So given those facts and circumstances that we don't quite know, I don't foresee that we'll be back up into that $2 million range anytime soon.
Ms. Tompkins?
So I'm going to say something that I think is hard, and I think we might be at this point where we need to look at these options. In this proposed budget of $340,000 that are cut, 256 are going to show up next year, or they're coming out of ARPA. So really, we're looking at 84,000 as permanent cuts. I feel like we have had a philosophy of saying that in departments, when someone retires or someone leaves, then we have an opening, and that's how we're going to save money. And I think we might need to look hard at the fact that we might have to make personnel cuts. That might be the only way that we are going to be viable. And that's a hard thing to say. And I just think it's something we can't just say we're waiting till people retire. It's a nice thing to do, but this is, I truly agree with Mr. O'Reilly that 256,000 of this, well, except for the things for ARPA, but there's probably going to be projects like that in the future. But, this is a significant amount of money that basically next year we're going to be paying because they're going to be salary.
Mr. Stauber?
Steve, did you want to say something, or could you unmute?
Go ahead. I'll address some of these when you and other council members are done. Thank you.
So I have two comments. One to Alderman Spiros. I agree that the insurance is a viable option to be paid by the utility if that accounts for $15,000 to $25,000. And if she were to make that in the form of a motion, I would support it. And that would preserve our contingency reduction of $18,000 theoretically. In my opinion, contingency fund usage is for emergencies. This is sort of an emergency, but if we preserve that $18,000 by getting the utility to pay their insurance, that would be good. The other comment I have is to Alderman O'Reilly and his comment, and supported by others. And it also kind of ties to the public comments that we had from Peg at the start of the meeting. And anything to do with economic development, I view as we're in kind of a rebuilding mode. And, the question is, why do we hire people at the top as to build our economic development in this case? We're lacking economic development, and it's costing us because we aren't building our base, if you want to put it that way in layman's terms. So when you look at the items, remove EDB's 2024 ED action plan at $23,000. Move the position start date to February 15th at $20,000 savings. Move the city planner to May 15th at a savings of $6,000. I kind of lump those together. If we get the right person as a economic development person for the city of Marshfield, I think that's the starting point, and it's long overdue. So I kind of have a different, glass half full view of this. I do appreciate the staff's quick work to, account for the $34,000 or $340,000 shortfall. I think it's good work, and I think the framework is solid. If we can get the motion for the insurance, I would support that. And again, economic development, I think is those three items are pretty much tied together. If we get the leadership in place, the action plan has already been postponed a couple of times, and I look at our economic development board as really restructuring and regrouping once we have that person in place. Thank you.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I guess as long as we're looking at.
Microphone.
Thank you. If we're looking at potential cuts, I would also like to bring up the city has a portion of that insurance policy that is basically a goodwill offering. It's a no-fault water policy that I've been told is valued at around $30,000 that we've done for a long time. I cannot personally wrap my head around why we offer this. It's no different than any other insurance that is offered through the private sector. If people want that insurance, that is something they should be claiming. I do not believe that, in my opinion, it is not the city's responsibility, nor should we be doing it. And I'll extend this a little bit further. I don't know who's all got their budget books here, but if you are, take a look at page 22 in that book, which is the general fund department expenses change year after year or year over year. There's some pretty large numbers in there. And if we look at administration, like the constituent had mentioned earlier, there's a 104.7% increase. Now, I know a lot of that can be explained, but I would think that that is something that we should definitely be reviewing when you see almost a $500,000 increase. In here we have the EMS and fire. I will kind of lump them together. It looks like EMS is the $306,000, which I'm assuming equates to the 3 additional firefighters we were looking at. But the fire is also showing $166,000 increase. Library, we're looking at $102,000 increase. Planning, we're looking at $311,000 increase. Police, $182,000 increase. Recreation, $97,000 increase. The shared ride, which is understandable because we don't have the COVID money to depend on, so that it explains why that went up in the amount it did. And we look at streets with a $324,000 increase, which I understand. We're dealing with additional costs, just like the general public is, but we're compounding the problem on the general public right now. And it just seems to me that we are on a road to failure. And I don't want to cut any services. I don't want anyone to lose their jobs. But to remain viable, we're just not doing it. And I think the harsh reality needs to be looked at. We continue to kick the can down the road. There has to be cuts.
Anybody else wish to be next? Okay, I've got Jennifer and Steve. Steve, you want to go last? I'll put Jennifer up first, okay? Okay, Jennifer, please.
So I just want
That's
to
fine.
clarify a couple of things. Mr. Stauber's recommendation about the motion to have Marshfield Insurance pay that portion of the public officials' liability. We did budget with the anticipation of doing that, and I recently had conversations with Mr. Cum from Marshfield Utilities, and they have agreed to pay for that for 2024, so a motion is not necessary there. Secondly, to just maybe provide a little bit of clarity around the no-fault sewer policy. I did have a conversation today with our insurance agent, and he explained that policy whereby we cover that on a no-fault basis because in statutes, as long as a municipality is maintaining a sewer system, and that is not specifically defined, so every municipality defines how they maintain their sewer system, the city isn't at fault. So when a break happens, and so what that means is they would deny those claims if we didn't have this no-fault policy, because statute protects that if we maintain our sewer system. So we have that sewer system, no-fault sewer policy, and likewise utilities has it on the water side. That's two separate policies in place for when that does happen. You know, if we have an event and there are 10 homeowners with a backup issue in their home, and the city tells them that they won't reimburse them, it's more of a goodwill gesture because there is no insurance coverage for it, but we own that sewer system. So it causes a lot of unhappy constituents when that happens. And so by paying the $30,000 policy, we avoid all of the frustration, issues with a break in the system. So that is why we have it, because I mean, if we didn't, then the league would just deny those, and the homeowner would have, you know, even probably more negative feelings towards the city with ownership of those systems. So I just wanted to give that explanation of why that was put in place. I did ask also about half the municipalities that the league insures do provide no-fault sewer protection to their residents, and about half don't.
Thank you, Jennifer. Steve? You're up.
So thank you. I apologize, and I apologize for not always muting promptly after I'm done talking. I just want to address a few things that were mentioned. First of all, with respect to Councilmember Spiros, the Van de Hay Waters issue with the pool hours and so forth, I'm glad you brought that up. That is something that the Parks and Recreation Director brought up as well. Looking at the temporary staffing hours, it appeared to me as though it was an increase that was maybe more than warranted, and I was asking him questions today, but I get the impression that that's probably not the case and not a good place to look for reductions. So I had to ask him to take a look at some other parks budget areas. And that's why kind of I threw at you the $10,000 cut today as something that's a little bit yet undefined. It may involve other budgets as a means of getting at that $10,000, what I picture as being the final piece of this. I think the insurance issue has already been addressed well by the finance director. And on the contingency, which also was brought up by Councilmember Sauber, I understand the desire not to reduce that unnecessarily. And you know, that's another issue we can look at. That's why we're having this conversation tonight. It won't be a great contingency after the potential salary adjustments, so I understand why there's a desire not to reduce that farther. Involving the main issue that's been raised in these comments by multiple council members about whether we are just kicking the can down the road. I will say that this work has been done by me in working with finance staff has been very quick, and I've been out of town the last several days myself. So it's been at a level that I think is not what you would normally do if you had longer time to work on trying to look for deeper cuts. I do understand the fact that just hiring people in the middle of the year, that means that when they come to the 2025 budget, we're going to be talking about people that will be taken on presumably for full year salaries. So it does in a way kind of not address the full issue that we're facing. So I recognize that. The reason on there is because, there was a big desire, I think, by the council and others to at least get ourselves back to where we were a couple of years ago in the public safety staffing, whether it be the one police officer or the 3 firefighter paramedics that we have not replaced because we've been holding the line the last couple of years. So ultimately, council can make the decision not to allow for the rehiring of any of those positions. That's certainly your purview, and I understand that. But from a public safety standpoint, I felt led to try and find a way to keep those in the 2024 budget. I'm sure there are other things we can look at. If we spend some more time on whether we'll come up with a dollar amount that we're seeking here, I'm not sure. I guess I just want you to know that we are trying to be prudent. We're not trying to kick the can down the road. That's why in recent years we've gotten away from even budgeting money, with your help, budgeting money to supplement the general fund budget from our reserve balance. But it's not always easy given the revenue, and certainly this pilot cut is a tough one to deal with. I would also like to address this administration budget issue, which is raised by the speaker at public comment and noted by council as well. Maybe Jennifer, if you're near the lectern, you can help me out here, but I guess I hadn't really noticed this. I have no idea sitting here right now, and it's kind of embarrassing for me to say this, I guess, that the increase in administration budget is so high. We're really not doing anything significantly different. We're taking on half of the new position of assistant city administrator / community development director, with the other half being charged to community development. So if you take the pay and benefits for that position, certainly it's significant, but how it got to the number where we're talking about 100% increase over last year's budget, I'm not understanding myself. And maybe there's an explanation that I need to get, because I don't have any idea where that would have come from. We're not doing anything new and huge in the administration area that I'm aware of.
Steve, I can address that. Sorry, I meant to. The administration budget includes the budget for the potential PEP payouts. So that already has a funding source of our committed fund balance. We've already, this is our grandfathered in plan. And in the past, we hadn't been budgeting for those, and then they would just, it was accounted for in a different manner. Okay, so now we had to set, instead of setting that money aside in an actual liability account with to be paid in the future, accounting standards required us to put that as part of a restricted fund balance reserve. So we did that, but we put that in the budget so that whenever we had a retirement of a person who was eligible for this, we didn't have to come back as a budget resolution. So the value of that plan, if everybody on that plan retired this year, it's budgeted as an expense, and also the revenue source is that fund balance applied that we've already saved for in prior years. So it's not a new expense against our tax levy. So that's why that has increased, because that's a change in practice from prior years.
Okay, I see that. And again, I apologize for not muting right away when I'm done speaking, but that went up from last year's $27,000 or $22,000 to $313,000. And that is the lion's share, the massive share of what people are seeing in terms of why the administration budget has gone up as much as it has.
Okay, we have Mr. Weigel. We've got a bunch of people that want to be heard here, so
I'll keep it brief. To echo Mr. O'Reilly's points of us having to make cuts and other comments too about, if this is a salary we're talking about, we're going to see it again in upcoming years too. What options do we have as far as increasing our revenue? Because otherwise we're just going to be up here every year making cuts, and we're not really council members anymore at that point. We're just custodians of a dying city, and we're just deciding what we're chopping off year after year.
Well, if I could address that for a second, it's a great question. I think we need to, we talked about the early, there's some things we want to start attacking, including the whole with the CIP and looking at what we can afford that part of the program as we head toward the 2025 budget.
Okay. He's gone again.
If we have discussions about, I think maybe we talk, the boost this year from the state of Wisconsin, but for the most part, our revenues tend to be flat. Our hands are tied on, taxing ourselves with property tax increases. The last 2 years, mid to less than 1%. So if we're going to keep funding services, we need to look at the revenue side along with the expense side.
Okay. All right, who's next? Mr. Werman. Or excuse me, Ms. Spears is next. I'm sorry. If I apologize.
All right. So I'm going to talk about some hard things here. Councilman Natasha brought this up, and I think we do have to discuss this, and this is personnel. I know this is not popular. I'm sorry, but I am going to bring this up. So we're delaying refilling 3 firefighter paramedics until 7/1. And I have concerns in general about that department. I think people need to understand, once you fill those positions, you can't ever stop filling those positions because of the
Maintenance of effort.
Maintenance of effort. I couldn't remember the term. So with the proposal of a new hospital system joining the Marshfield Clinic, are we aware of what their plans would be for handling ambulance calls? Do we know, what they've done in the past? Do we know what they do at the hospitals that they own in the communities that they're located? Because I have a fear, and this is just a fear, it's not anything I've heard, so I don't want to put this out there in the rumor mill, but I have a fear that once these two organizations join, that we may see some differences in the services they offer and the way that they provide those services. But we're banking on the fact that we're going to remain as busy as we have. And undoubtedly, if we do remain that busy, we need those 3 firefighters. But if we don't, because the model shifts with a new healthcare system, I just want people to be aware that you cannot then reduce staffing. So if their workload reduces because of a model shift by the main healthcare provider in this town, we cannot reduce that staffing. So I want everyone to just kind of process that as I am processing it. I actually don't know the real answer here because I'm not sure we know what Essentia and that merger is going to provide as far as services, or what their model of care will be, or if we'll see a reduction in services in the city of Marshfield. Second thing, delay refilling police detective until 5/1. I would just be curious to know how much overtime we're racking up, the detectives are racking up at this point with not having that extra detective. Just curiosity. I mean, if they're working tons of overtime trying to solve cases, then maybe that's justified. If we don't see that happening, do we really need this extra police detective, or this refilling of this police detective? Like I say, this is a difficult conversation, but we're in a very difficult position, and our position is only set to get more difficult next year, and it could considerably get more difficult. It may not just be this reduction in the pilot that we're dealing with. I think that we have to make some harder decisions.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there's a possibility that we could get the items that I listed earlier off of sheet 22 of the budget. If we can get a written description per council member for what those increases cover for those 25 items or whatever may be on that list. I think the reality is we need to know what's included for these increases to make, break it down. And I would also like to elaborate on Alderperson Spiros' comment. We still can't forget that we have a pending lawsuit with the medical facility in this town. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. And if we don't put ourselves in a financially responsible situation, we could destroy our financial setting. We don't know what that's going to be. And I cannot keep moving forward like this. It's just, we need, as sad as it is to say, we need to make some cuts. Now, what that level of cuts is, or what services or positions it are, I don't know. And we are under the gun right now, proverbially, to make these changes and get this budget approved. But I think there needs to be some extremely serious talk about what we're doing here, not to put us in a worse position.
Mr. Werman.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I would, when we refer to cuts, I mean, I assume everybody's on the same page that we're looking at hopefully cutting these open positions and trying to avoid cutting filled positions. Like, I think the last thing that we want to do is try to reduce staff, but I think people are throwing it out as this is a very real possibility. Do we have a rough number on what these open positions would be if they were completely cut versus this partial cut? And then I think kind of tacking on to what everybody's been saying here is that I believe that's the low-hanging fruit, right? That's the first thing that we should be attacking. And then it sucks to lose those positions, but it buys us until the next budget season to figure our crap out, because obviously there's a lot going on. And if this is a recurring issue and something that we're trying to, again, just delay the inevitable, it's going to come back and bite us. We need to long-term plan and not think short.
Is there anybody else who wishes to be recognized? Okay, Natasha.
This would be for Steve. What's our debt, or maybe even for Jessica, what's our deadline for approving this budget?
Next Tuesday.
Budget.
Yeah, thank you. I can take that. And I was going to jump in with this anyway. Before we started this, in fact, a few days ago, here's where I thought this was headed, and that's why the next line item in the agenda is what it is. We have an opportunity. I know it's not the most desirable, but I think it's where we are right now. We need to adopt a budget by next Tuesday. We really do, because we need to, have 2.5 weeks or so to get the tax bills out on the deadline that we're required to. So one opportunity we have, if we decide on not making the cuts right now, would be to adopt the budget. Maybe we make the cuts that are seen to be obvious here that we can all agree on, the reduction in workers' comp or whatever. But then, plug the hole, if you will, with fund balance applied. Now, before you jump out of your seats and come after me through the computer, that would be just to buy enough time to allow us to meet the deadline, have a budget, get the tax bills done. But in the next couple of meetings, as we get into the early to middle part of December, to have a thoughtful process to make changes and amend it so that at the end of the day, we don't use fund balance applied. Moody's and everybody else is happy with us, but we buy ourselves a little bit of time by using it as a plug number for the time being until those final decisions are made. You can think about that and let me know here in a minute. The other comment I want to make as far as what would happen, I think Councilmember Werman might have said this, if we chose not to refill any of those positions at all, and not at mid-year or any time for the year, keep them vacant, you could take that savings to a much greater degree. 156 that I proposed saving in the 3 firefighter paramedics was half year. So if we went the full year, we would save $312,000. That's what we put in the original budget to transfer from the general fund to cover those. And then the detective would be, roughly $100,000. So you're looking at, I showed about a third of it as savings. The two combined would be, a little over $400,000. So you more than cover the deficit. I'm not suggesting that you do that, or maybe that's where you're headed, but that's not my suggestion. But I would suggest that maybe we hit the pause button, do the plug number, with fund balance applied, get the budget applied, or a budget approved, and then spend a couple weeks sorting this out and getting something that you were more comfortable with, putting us in a better position, whether it be deeper cuts or changes in cuts or whatever that might be.
Mr. Rigel.
Thank you. A couple questions. Just to confirm here, when we say this needs to be approved by next Tuesday, we mean by midnight next Tuesday, is that correct? Should we not have that meeting on Monday then, or a previous day? In
Well,
case
yeah,
there's a meeting on Monday then, or a previous day in case it's just
if I can jump in for a second, yeah, just to jump in, the 28th is not a hard deadline. I mean, if we had a council meeting on the 29th or the 30th perhaps, but we need enough time to be able to do the tax bills, and 2.5 weeks is about what we need. We need to get them out in mid-December. So the 28th of November is the last time that we are planning to meet at this point before that needs to happen. So my thought is if we don't approve a budget tonight, we need to do so on the 28th of November. You can decide whether or not that means having made all the cuts by then, or plugging in a number of fund balance applied until those cuts are made in the subsequent, 2 meetings or something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Tompkins, do you still have the floor? Or?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Warman.
Would it be, I know this is a holiday week, so I apologize in advance for asking for this. Would it be completely inappropriate to ask for these departments? I think Andy said it. I don't remember who brought up the overtime. Maybe it was Rebecca. Somebody mentioned overtime for the detectives. Would it be completely inappropriate to ask for a labor analysis from those teams to suggest the highest need? Because it sounds like between the firefighters and the detectives, we would hit the number that we're looking for. Obviously, we don't want to just say, hey, well, there we go, we're done. So can we get some sort of labor analysis to show which teams are in the most need, and maybe we can help evaluate that possibly by end of the week so we can do it before Tuesday?
I see Jennifer shaking her head. Yes. So Steve, is that possible?
Jennifer shaking.
I'm sorry. I was going to defer to Jennifer because that's where the calculations would come from. Did that come out clearly?
Yes, as long as either the police chief or assistant police chief is available to consult with, we can put something together tomorrow.
And just for clarity, I do mean all 4 positions.
Yes.
Okay, just think. Sorry, re-clarifying. I said all 4 positions, realizing there's 3 firefighters and a detective. I'm talking about all 4 line items, because there is a city planner on here, the ACA, CDD, I forget what assistant, and then the detectives is all 4 line items.
Okay.
All 4 line items.
Okay.
Ms. Spiros?
Let me ask, is there anything more that the council wants for information in advance of the meeting on the 28th?
Okay, is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, there is more that I would like to know. When we're looking at the things that Mr. Worman just requested, please be very specific on what I asked was how much overtime are police detectives accumulating? I want to know how much overtime they're accumulating doing detective work, not filling in, for somebody else, that's got a day off or something like that. That I want to see the true overtime related to their job specific function, not a cross position. The other thing I want to talk about, and I just want to throw this out there, is there any possibility that somebody in our administration could meet with the Marshfield Clinic and ask them, do you know anything when Essentia comes here? Do you have any plans? Is there anything you're negotiating with your ambulance runs or with your care model as far as ambulance runs? I don't know if they'll tell you anything, but maybe they will. Maybe there's certain people here who have connections and could talk to somebody directly and get some of that information. But I think it's really important for us to know that. In addition, there are 3 firefighters. I mean, there is always an option of hiring only one. It doesn't, it doesn't mean a complete cut. And we have to provide the services this community needs, and we cannot burn out our fire department. I am fully aware of that. So we need to do what is absolutely best. But we have to look into the future. So I did want to talk about that. And that might be all that I'm looking for.
Okay, who's next? I say Mr. O'Reilly and then Mr. Stauber.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll just add to that. I mentioned it earlier, but if we could see a breakdown on page 22 for what the variance in dollar is for each of those, I think there was 25, 26 line items there on the left column, that would be appreciated. That I'm asking for what's included, with those increases.
Mr. Stauber, did you withdraw? Okay, I see our acting chief of the fire department is up. Without objection, I'll give him 3 minutes.
I just wanted to just make clear that Essentia, even if they come, they do not provide 911 service for any of the areas that they're in. So just wanted to make that point for anyone that would have questions and they're thinking about that they would provide any sort of 911 service. So just want to make that point. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would the clerk?
We have a motion and a second.
Would the clerk please read the motion?
Clerk, please read the motion.
I was just waiting for Steve to mute. The motion by Stauber and second by Giles to approve the framework for the adjustment for the 2024 budget proposed by City Administrator Barr. Reducing the expenses by $340,000.
What are your wishes? Are you ready to vote?
Your wishes. Are you ready to vote?
Could we get a clarification?
Steve, you gotta mute the line.
There's a lot of back.
You gotta mute the line. There's a lot of back.
Mute or something. I was really confused.
I don't know what's going on here, but okay.
Okay, I'll repeat the motion again. A motion by Stauber and a second by Giles to approve the framework for the adjustments to the 2024 budget proposed by City Administrator Barg, reducing the expenses by $340,000.
That's the motion on the floor. There'll be a board vote. Okay, if there's no further objection, please vote. Okay, what do we got here? We've got 3 ayes and what? 9 or 3 and 7 nay? Yes. So the motion fails. What is the pleasure of the board? Mr. Earls. Well, yes, you have the floor. You have the floor.
Okay. I will make a motion that we meet on Tuesday, whatever date that would be, a week, 28th, November 28th, to further discuss this budget and hopefully get an approved budget.
And it's seconded by Mr. Varsho. Discussion? Go ahead. Okay, let's see, Ms. Tompkins first, then Mr. Werman.
So we have a regular council meeting that day. So would this be pre-council meeting?
That's correct.
That's correct, yes. Okay. Mr. Werman, you don't want to be recognized? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further excuse me? Oh, Steve, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead. Steve, go ahead.
That's okay. And again, I apologize for that. Yeah, I got it. My thought is it would be 5 o'clock. I didn't hear the answer to that question, but certainly with the amount of discussion here, I would think you would want to have it before the regular business so that, you're able to just get on with that when you're done. The other thing I would say real briefly, if I can jump in, there have been a lot of requests for some information. We'll try and get you everything you asked for, but with the holiday weekend, there may not be a lot of lead time. Some of that may not come until getting closer to the meeting, but we'll do our best to comply with your wishes.
Any further discussion? If not, we'll have a board vote. Please vote.
They said.
Mr. Fire?
Okay, the vote is 9-1 with Mr. Stauber as a nay. Okay. And there being no further business, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by O'Reilly, second by Andrew? Andy? All those in favor say aye. Or who else you want on the board? Aye. We stand adjourned.